Arrival. The mid-morning light was soft, sifted through oaks and maples when Eleanor Nora Brooks finally drew up at the crooked gravel lane that led to her new land. Her hands, though lined and spotted with years, were steady on the steering wheel, her heart a mixture of resolution, relief, and trembling excitement. This was her sanctuary at last, purchased with quiet care after decades of saving, dreaming, and regretting that she had never had the place of her own. Beyond the trees lay the farmhouse, paint faded, windows which might have been replaced looming like blank faces. The barn sagged slightly, the fence was broken in places, but to Nora, it was perfect. She remembered a childhood visit to a cousin's farm, how the air smelled of hay, of earth, of promise. She imagined chairs on the porch in summer evenings, wind in the fields, sunrise over corn. She had already begun hiring a few local hands to clear brush, fix a leak in the roof, mend the fence. The bank's loan was in place, and she had moved her life upstate from the city to this quiet corner. At 73, she intended to spend her remaining years tending land, raising a few animals, writing her memoirs, and simply feeling peace. She had told her son, Michael Brooks, and his wife Heather about the farm. She had emphasized she would live there alone, that she didn't need help, but also that she didn't want interference. She believed in boundaries. She believed in dignity. When she backed out of her old house in the city, she carried little more than a few boxes and an old oak rocking chair. She left behind the apartment where she had lived since Michael's childhood. Sold, closed, emptied. This was her new beginning. That first week, Nora walked the property daily, measured the field, made notes in a leather journal, ordered some chicks and goats. She felt a tremor of pleasure when the first baby goats trotted up to the fence and bleated. She believed she could give them a good life, even in her age. Late in the afternoon of her second Saturday at the farm, she received a text from Heather. "Can we come up Sunday and see the place? Maybe stay? Would be nice to have some time together." Nora felt her chest tighten. She typed a brief response. "Sure, come by in the afternoon. But I'll be living here. You won't have to stay overnight unless you want." She hesitated, then added, "But understand, it's my home." Nora turned off the phone, took a deep breath, and walked out toward the goats, touching their soft ears. The sunlight slanted. She felt content.
The guest wave. Sunday came. Around 2 o'clock, a dusty SUV rattled up the gravel driveway. Michael sat at the wheel, Heather beside him, their 2 children, Ava, age 12, and Liam, age 9, in the back. They carried coolers, suitcases, plastic tubs of toys, a small speaker. Heather stepped out, in a summer dress, sunglasses shading her eyes. She swept the porch in a practiced gesture. She smiled at Nora, but Nora perceived something behind the smile, something polite but edged with calculation. "Mother, it's wonderful to see you in this place," Heather said. "It's so rural, so just you." Michael came around and hugged Nora. She felt his strength, a broad back, the scent of his cologne, and something hesitant. He said, "Mom, this place is amazing. I can't believe you did this." They all sat on the porch. Heather produced lemonade and cookies. The children scampered. Nora was delighted, but cautious. She walked them through the field, introduced the goats, showed them the barn where she would store hay. She explained that she intended to build a small workshop, maybe plant fruit trees. She said she would be happy to have her family visit, but her life here was to be independent. Heather listened, nodded graciously. Later, after dinner, grilled vegetables, goat cheese, bread that Nora had baked, Heather turned to Nora. "You know," she said, in a warm tone, "Michael and I have been thinking. It might be better if we came up more often, even stayed here sometimes. It's so peaceful, for weekends, maybe even a month or so. We could take turns, me, you, the kids. You'd have companionship, help." Nora's heart tightened. She looked at Michael. He remained quiet. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I bought this for me." They left next day, packing up, promising to return. The SUV's dust trail faded. Nora exhaled. That night she lay awake,
staring at the ceiling. She knew what Heather meant. She felt the pressure behind the pleasantness. She heard footsteps in her dreams, doors opening, voices, growing numbers. She whispered to the ceiling, "This is my home." She turned and slept, though lightly. But soon they returned. They came weekends, then entire weeks. Couches and mattresses arrived. Heather began having her mother and sisters over for visits. She suggested painting one guest bedroom. She talked of hiring extra help, rooms, dishes, childcare. She told Nora she would help run the farm with you, make it more efficient. She asked one day whether she could move her sewing machines into part of the barn. She requested space in the kitchen. She proposed installing a hot tub on the deck beside Nora's rocking chair. She watched. She listened. She said yes when it seemed harmless, but always gently, with a reservation. She said, "I'll think about that." Or, "Let's see how it works." She smiled. She cooked meals for extra people. She accommodated. But inside, she was in defensive mode. Gradually, the guests began to feel less like guests. Heather would stay 5 days, then longer. The children began calling the farm our place. They would leave doors unlocked, walk into Nora's private study unbidden, examine her journals, open drawers. Heather remarked, "Wouldn't it be nice if Mom sold you this old house in town and moved up here permanently?" Nora's heart pounded, but she kept composure. She refused to argue. She carried on with her goats, with her repairs, with her quiet routines. She made notes. Then came the first high point of disruption. One morning, the goats began bleating wildly. The coop door had been left open. The chickens were scattered. The barn door was ajar. Feathers were strewn across the hay floor. The goat feed was knocked over. The comings and goings of many guests had left a mess. She walked in, heart sinking. She heard laughter in the yard. Heather's sisters walking through the pasture. She saw them tossing apples to goats. One had her phone up, taking pictures. It was small, but deliberate. Nora cleaned quietly, restored order. Later that day, she went to Heather. "Who left this door open?" she said softly, indicating the coop. Heather looked surprised, then said innocently, "Oh, I didn't know. The kids must have done it." She offered an apology, but Nora saw how her jaw set. She accepted the apology, but in her mind, she resolved she would not let this escalate further. The retreat strategy. Nora realized that confrontation would only provoke more. She had to act subtly, decisively, from behind the scenes. First, she reworked the locks of the house and barn. She installed a discreet keypad and a few motion sensors. She wired cameras in corners no one would see. Yes, she was old, but she had prepared. She told Heather she had to tighten security because wild animals in the area had been known to break in. She presented it as prudent precaution, as though everyone benefited. Second, she quietly reached out to the local land registry, the county clerk, a real estate attorney she had found when purchasing the farm. She asked to get clear, documented proof that she was sole owner of the house, the land, the barns, a deed in her name alone. She retrieved all records and kept backup copies in a safe deposit box. Third, she began to document everything happening at the farm now. Pictures of damage, footprints, extra carpentry done without permission, any signs of structural change, any improvements installed by Heather, commentary from neighbors. She recorded conversations in mild tones so that she could prove intrusion or overstepping. She kept a daily log in a hidden notebook. Fourth, she began a strategic removal of certain amenities, not all at once, but in small steps, masked as maintenance or repair. A faucet would temporarily fail. The hot tub idea she'd decline under the guise of electrical wiring problems. She would refuse to restock certain supplies until guests left. She'd conserve water or repair plumbing by shutting off certain spigots. She would schedule repairmen at odd times when no guests were around, and sometimes tell Heather, "Pipes are being updated in that wing, so don't use that bathroom now." She'd leave the door locked and claim, "Electrician is here." Meanwhile, she covertly watched guest movements via cameras. She made sure bathroom doors had locks, so that only she could enter. The goats and chickens were mostly her project. She acquired more, expanded the coops and pens.
She allowed them to roam near guest areas. She let the hens wander into garden plots that Heather had begun to landscape. She let goat droppings appear near lawn paths. She accidentally allowed a chicken to roost near a guest window. She made the animals a gentle nuisance. She would plant morning feed pans that attracted the goats when visitors were in the yard. She placed scratching posts just where people walked so they'd step in chicken scratch. Nothing destructive, but enough discomfort. Then she watched from afar. She sat in hidden vantage points, binoculars, camera, journal. She observed Heather's irritation as guests moaned about the animals or the smell. She heard murmurs about mud, droppings, goats in flower beds. She allowed the guests to feel the disturbance. Meanwhile, she let the farm run, let hay deliveries arrive, kept the goats and chickens healthy, insisted that guests clean up after themselves. Gingerly, quietly pointed out when things were messy, reinstated bathroom access slowly, and withheld it at moments. She began closing off wings of the house for her sole use. She insisted on certain areas being off limits. She steadily marginalized the guest occupancy internal footprint. Heather's resistance would appear in small protests. Why can't I use that bathroom again? I thought we agreed this was a shared home now. Why did the farmhand lock the barn again? Nora would respond with calmness. Mild reason. We're preserving integrity. Repairs going on. I'm sorry, I was told to keep it locked. She never lost her temper, never yelled. The tension built. Then one evening, she overheard Heather on the phone with a lawyer in the city. She heard phrases, transfer title, deed, right of occupancy, co-ownership. Nora's chest seized. They were planning to demand legal rights. She realized the battle would now enter the courts. Nora was ready. She continued to gather evidence, logs, timestamps, video stills, emails, text messages from Heather suggesting move up permanently, claims that Michael would transfer his share, proposals for partitioning the property. She had all the original purchase documents, mortgage statements, and the deed in her name alone. She checked county records. No joint title, no recorded trust. Heather had no legal claim unless she could prove the title had been changed. She met with her attorney quietly. She discussed options: restraining order, eviction, ejectment, partition suit to force sale, or simply revoking any implied occupancy rights. Her attorney was firm. As long as Nora held clear title and could prove no tenancy or written lease, the law was on her side. Heather would need a contract or a claim. In the absence of that, she was just an uninvited guest. Nora expressed she did not wish to humiliate her family, but she would protect her home. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic shifted. Heather grew curt. She complained more about goats, the smell, the lack of water pressure in her bathroom. Guests canceled visits. Heather began talking with friends in the city of helping mother, while Michael relocated, making things more efficient. She tried to pressure Nora to sign a contract making her a co-owner, to deed over part of the property, to pay rent. Nora refused politely, always saying, "I'll think about it." She never engaged in loud arguments. Finally came the evening of confrontation. Heather sat Nora down in the living room, the heart of the invasion, and laid out a thick binder of legal language: draft deed transfer, co-ownership forms, proposed terms. She said she was doing it for the children, for efficiency, for future security. Nora listened. She did not interrupt. When Heather finished, Nora quietly pulled her folder of evidence. She slid across the table the original deed, the mortgage receipt, the records, the logs, the video snapshots of repairs done, photos of guests using her private areas, and a letter from her attorney saying, "You have no legal claim." Heather's face went white. Nora said simply, "This is my farm. You have been guests. You have no legal right to the house or land. You may leave, but if you remain, I will file for ejectment and damages. I prefer you go quietly." Heather gasped. She stuttered. Michael, who had been silent in a chair, stood and looked at his mother. The children sat frozen. Outside, the goats were bleating. The wind rattled branches. Silence hung heavy. Next morning, the family packed. Heather slammed down drawers, cursed under her breath. The children cried. Michael said nothing. He just loaded the SUV. They left. But suddenly, it was over.
silence, and rebuilding. For the first few days, the farm was quiet. The goats bleated for their human presence. Nora fed them, let out the chickens, repaired fences, planted more shrubs. She felt a hollow ache. The absence of her son unsettled her, but she held strong. Then one morning, a battered pickup came up the driveway. It was Michael, alone. The SUV was gone. Heather and the kids were not with him. He stepped out, dusty, uncertain. "Mom?" he said. He approached the porch, looked around. I'm sorry. I acted like I forgot what home means. I saw how they were pressing, and I didn't stand up. I'm sorry I let this happen." Nora did not rush to embrace him. She watched. Time had cooled her. She said quietly, "Show me." Michael nodded. He walked into the field, takes off his shoes, walks through the grass. He sees the goat pens, the coop, the barns. He rolls up his sleeves. He asks if he can help. He lifts hay, fixes fence, sweeps. He wakes early, joins in chores. Without demanding praise, he works. He puts in long hours. Nora watches him silently. He does small things, mending a broken board, clearing brush, securing the barn door, feeding animals. He does not ask to stay in her quarters. He sleeps in a small guest cabin, works from dawn to dusk. Gradually, Nora notices he is consistent. He is present. He is humble. He meets her eyes without shame. He clears dead branches, replants seedlings where Heather had uprooted them. He fixes windows. He even replaces broken hinges on her desk drawer, the one Heather had messed with. He tells stories of the city, admits he had been naive, that Heather had pressured him, that he regrets not trusting his mother, but he does not beg. He does. One evening, Nora comes in from the barn and finds Michael cooking dinner. Simple vegetables, goat cheese, bread. He has lit lamps. The scent is warm. She sits. He says, "I hope you'll join me soon." They talk little that night, but a shift has begun. Over weeks, the farm hums again. Heather sends text messages. "I'm sorry. Are you okay?" But Nora ignores them. Heather's calls go to voicemail. The children send drawings, but so far, Nora does not respond. She is rebuilding the peace first. Michael helps Nora decide new boundaries: a locked gate, a path to his cabin, and clear areas that belong only to Nora. He helps remodel the West Wing for her sole use. He builds a workshop for himself. He clears a wildflower meadow. He digs a new coop. He builds a small guest cottage, not adjoining her house, in case she ever wants to host visitors, under her terms. He builds fences so that goats do not wander into her private quarters. Slowly, rest is possible. Her sleep is deeper. The animals respond to calm. The sunlight returns to paths. The barn smells of hay and animals, not tension. One day, as Nora walks past the old foundation of a shed, where Heather once wanted to put a playroom, Michael stops her and hands her a pot of newly planted lavender. He says, "For you." She places it outside her window. She breathes in its scent. They walk back toward the house through tall grass and wildflowers. Nights pass. They share quiet evenings. She reads in the parlor. He sits nearby, repairing tools in the glow of a lamp. Words are spare, but trust grows through presence. Then, in late summer, guests do return, but on Nora's terms. She invites a few old friends to stay in the guest cabin. She sets rules: no wandering into her private wing, no pets roaming, quiet at night, clean up. They agree. The children visit for a weekend, but stay in their cottage, help feed goats, pitch in. There are no demands, no pressure. They come, spend time, but then depart. Heather sends a note of regret. Nora ignores it, but her heart feels steadier, unmoved. Recognition and quiet restoration. The turning point is small. One evening, Nora is sitting on the porch in her rocking chair. The maples rustle. Michael walks by, carrying 2 mugs of herbal tea. He pauses, turns, offers one to her. She nods, takes it. They sit together in silence for a few minutes. Then Michael says, softly, "Mom, I realized I never asked permission." He clears his throat. "I came here on her insistence. I didn't see how you felt. I'm sorry." Nora turns to him. Her eyes are moist but steady. She puts her hand on his. "I'm glad you're here now." That night, sleeping in her own room, she hears him closing the guest cabin door gently. Turning off lights, she realizes he is respecting her space. She doesn't demand conversation. She doesn't ask for statements. She observes, with relief, that the boundary is honored. In the weeks after, conversations grow softly. She asks his opinion on fencing. He collaborates. He encourages her writing. He counsels about selling extra produce. He helps her set up a small farm shop in the barn where she can sell goat cheese and eggs. They work side by side. She notices he listens more carefully. No longer distracted by phone calls, no more pressure from Heather. He's grounded in this land. One afternoon, as they dig a garden bed together, Michael says, "Do you ever want them to come back?" Nora thinks. She looks at him, then at the field, the animals, the quiet paths. She says, "If they come, it will be on my terms, and only if it doesn't risk my peace." He nods. Time flows. The seasons shift. The goats gain weight. Goats give birth. Chickens lay. The farm hums. Nora's writing advances. She types by the window, the sun on her shoulders. Michael markets their cheese to a local co-op. He helps fix the stone wall. He respects her rhythms, her quiet rituals, her solitary walks. He doesn't intrude, but he is present. One autumn evening, Heather calls again. This time she says, "Nora, I'd like to come see the farm with the kids." Nora listens to the wavering voice. She asks, "Why now?" Heather says, "Because they miss Grandma, and I realize I overstepped." Nora doesn't answer immediately. She stands, walks to the window, looks at the field, watches goats graze, watches Michael closing the barn door. She hears nothing but wind. She closes her eyes. Finally, she picks up the phone. She says, "Yes, come for a weekend, but you'll stay in the guest cottage, abide by my rules. You'll garden, help build fencing, feed animals, no entering my quarters. Understand?" Heather says yes. They visit that weekend. The children run to pet the goats. They help Michael and Nora carry buckets of grain. There's laughter. Heather apologizes quietly in the guest cottage. "I was greedy. Ambition overtook me. I'm sorry." Nora listens. She says, "Thank you for saying that." The invitation is open, but only if peace is respected. Heather nods. The weekend passes. They leave. No more demands come. The boundaries hold. One evening, Nora and Michael watch the sunset. The barn, the fields, the fences, the animals, all speaking of restoration, of a home saved. Nora leans her head on Michael's shoulder. He takes her hand. They sit quietly in the dusk. No loud reconciliation, no grand declarations. But in that silence, the truth is made manifest. The old woman's dignity preserved, the damage accounted for. The relationships slowly rebuild through presence and respect. The daughter-in-law's ambition is tamed, not humiliated, but contained. The son returns, not as mediator, but as servant, as reclaimed child. Nora breathes in the air of her home, feels the wind, the animal smell, the hush after dusk. She knows she has lived this fight, not just described it. She knows someone reading might see, this is about me. The fight for dignity, for boundaries, for quiet sovereignty. And so it is. The farm hums softly, rooted in truth, restored by action, settled in a whisper of peace. Sure, I can expand the story much more, deepen the scenes, add more internal monologue, more vivid sensory detail, more subplots, moments of tension, foreshadowing, etc. Would you prefer me to continue from where the last ended, making it longer, towards, say, 10, 12,000 words, or rewrite the whole with more detail? In the meantime, here's an additional extended section continuing from the restoration phase, adding more depth, conflict, daily life, and emotional tension to pull things further. If you like this, I can keep going to reach the word count you're after. Roots, deepening. The mornings at the farm were colder now, dew clinging to grass blades like tiny crystal knives that prickled through the soles of Nora's worn boots. She rose before dawn, like she always had in summer, but now the air carried the taste of frost. Her breath fogged in the kitchen window as she washed her hands in the sink, listening to a rooster crow somewhere and the distant creak of the barn door as Michael made his rounds. Michael had been there nearly 3 weeks. He drove from a small rented cottage an hour down the road. Some nights he slept in the old guest cabin, but more often he stayed in the smaller cabin he'd built himself, modest, with one window facing east for morning light, a wood stove, simple cedar walls, and enough of a workshop in back that he could sharpen tools, mend broken gates, and keep his oil lamp flickering late into the night. Nora found herself watching him without always meaning to. One morning, she saw Michael crouched in the chicken coop, hands deep in straw, gathering eggs. Under his brow, a soft frown of concentration. One egg was cracked. He replaced it carefully, out of sight. He spoke quietly to the hens, as though apologizing, though to what, she could not tell. Nora's heart stilled with an unfamiliar swell of gratitude. She patched holes in the fence. A goat that had slipped through the night before ambled back across the meadow. Michael chased after, his boots slipping in mud, his arms brushing low branches. He caught the goat by the collar, hoisted it back through the fence, brushing dirt off its white belly. Nora, standing on the porch with coffee in hand, watched. The sky was pink overhead, mist hovering low over field edges, the smell of wet earth and hay strong. For a moment, the world seemed held in fragile beauty. Inside her house, Nora started waking in the middle of the night, the spring mattress of her bed creaking, her mind replaying Heather's demands, the weight of them, the pressure. She smelled goat manure drifting through a cracked window. She listened to chickens clucking in the cover of darkness. It was both absurd and grounding that her sanctuary now had odor and noise, but in a way, those noises belonged to her, not to someone else. She took to writing letters she never sent, to Heather, to her younger self, to her late husband, whom she lost decades ago. She wrote about regrets, about what she had lost to acquiescence, about the mornings she had given up, the boundaries she had allowed to blur. She read some passages aloud to herself in the living room, voice echoing off old wooden floorboards. Michael began to bring out old photo albums out to the porch, asking about stories. One evening at dusk, he flipped through the album of Nora's youth. Nora in sun-bleached dresses, barefoot, legs muddy, in a field. Nora with Harold, their wedding, the barn they planned to buy but never did because the city job paid steadier. Nora always longing for land, for a place where she could build slowly. He asked, "Mom, did you always see yourself here?" Nora held a picture, traced her young self's face with a finger. "Yes," she said. "Even then, I dreamed of this land." Her voice shook. Michael said nothing for a long time, just closed the album softly. He put a hand on hers. She did not pull away.
Temptations and doubts. Even as peace settled, ripples of tension surfaced. The farm's income was modest, selling goat cheese, eggs, sometimes roadside stand in the nearby town. A small co-op accepted her produce. But utility bills, feed bills, property taxes, everything added up. Some days payments took longer to arrive. The feed mill had delayed delivery once. Rainstorms ruined sections of fence. One of the goats got sick. A vet visit cost more than she anticipated. Michael tried to help. He brokered better price contracts, made phone calls, arranged for bulk feed purchase to save costs. Nora watched him. She noticed stress lines near his temples, saw him lie awake by lamplight, fret over numbers, carry the weight of responsibility for the things she had always borne alone. She realized independence mattered, but so did partnership. Without losing autonomy, she could allow help. But doubts lingered quietly. Would she lose control if she depended too much? Would Michael or Heather try to leverage helpfulness into possession? At night, Nora's dreams flickered. Doors opening, strangers stepping into her parlor, taking her chair, moving her desk. She woke and heart pounded. But each morning, the smell of hay, the low murmur of goats, the soft patter of rain on the roof grounded her. She breathed in that identity of owner, not just of land, but of boundaries and self. Heather's messages continued. Texted photos of the kids at school, upcoming school plays, suggestions of visiting more often, maybe staying longer after December so Michael won't have to travel so much. Heather asked whether Nora might consider leasing part of the land to Michael or making them co-owners. Nora paused every time. She reviewed her deed, her legal paperwork. She consulted her attorney. If I lease, am I giving away rights? The attorney said yes, partial rights. She said, if I make co-owner, then I might need to share decision-making. Nora weighted safety, autonomy versus connection. One chilly morning, Heather showed up unannounced, stepping out of a rental car, carrying overnight bags, looking hopeful. She knocked at the door. Nora recognized Heather's silhouette through the storm glass window, shoulders slumped, face drawn. It was the first time Heather came without coordinating with Michael. Inside, Nora let her in. They sat at the kitchen table. Nora let the kettle boil, slapped a cloth on a broken chair leg she'd repaired earlier. Heather's hands shook. We thought, maybe I could stay here for a while until Michael's project in the city picks up. The kids miss the farm. I miss this. Heather's voice was softer than when she had made demands. Nora studied Heather. She smelled shampoo, lavender. The smell contrasted with goat stalls, with raw wood, but Nora allowed it. She weighed Heather's tone. She saw in Heather's eyes both regret and persistent ambition. She asked, what are you offering, Heather? Heather said, I'll pay rent, I'll do chores, I'll respect your privacy, I won't touch the deed, I'll follow your rules. Nora's heart fluttered. Part of her had missed family being close, but she also remembered everything. The nights draped with tension, the smell of strangers in her study, the feelings of being edged out. She looked outside. Goats grazing, barn doors creaking, snow hinting in the gray sky. She said, come in winter, but in the guest cottage. You help with feed, with firewood, with the animals. But this house, my rooms, stay mine. My rules. And you must agree, no more talk of ownership. It ends here. Co-owner, deed, control, no. Heather hesitated, nodded. Nora saw her exhale, hope and fear mingling. It was a fragile peace. The test of winter. Winter came with its gray light and biting wind. Snow clung to rooftops. Paths froze. Goats huddled in the barn, their breath like steam. Nora woke at dawn, bundled in wool sweaters and thick socks. Fed goats, scraped ice off troughs, filled the wood stove. She smelled sap in the trees. She felt the cold in her bones. Michael, too, rose early, before light, breaking ice, chopping wood, loading hay. Heather arrived with luggage, children in tow, onto the snowy driveway, breath visible in the air. The guest cottage door squeaked as they entered. The children stomped snow off boots. Heather unwrapped scarves. Nora offered hot broth. The cold was indifferent. Fences needed repair. The water line froze. The goat heater in the barn failed. Michael rigged a temporary heater. Snowdrifts blocked access to one pen. Heather offered to help, gathered the children, shoveling, sweating, backspending. They worked without complaint. Inside the cottage, at night, the children whispered, laughed, but stayed within their quarters. Nora heard them reading, telling stories. She smelled cocoa, faint perfume, the smell of soot. She slept with one window cracked, one to the household, one to her solitude. That winter, a big storm knocked down power lines. The farmhouse went dark. Nora wrapped herself in quilts from her old life in the city, lit lanterns. The goat band's generator sputtered. Michael trudged inches through snow, restored power. Heather lit the candles in the cottage. The children shivered. Nora boiled water for tea. In those dark hours,
Something shifted. Heather knelt beside Nora in the kitchen, hands clasped. "Thank you for letting us be here these days. I know I've asked a lot." Nora, by lantern light, watched Heather's face, tired, real. She nodded. No words of grand apology, but the trembling in Heather's voice was enough. In those cold nights, Michael walked up the porch to Nora, offered her a jacket, and stood in silence. Nora felt his presence as protection, rather than interference. Winter pressed on. In thaw, the land sighed. Snow melted, ground softened. Nora could plant seeds of spring under a tarp in her workshop. She tasted back her hope.